Before you buy a home in Buckhead, you need to make sure that this is the right area for you. Does Buckhead have the amenities that you're looking for, or the schools, or even the right community for you? And more importantly, we'll also talk about whether Buckhead is a safe area and how much the homes cost here. To really better understand these things, we have to understand where Buckhead is and whether or not it's like a suburb or a city. And so let's get those things right out of the way. Buckhead is in the northern part of Atlanta, and it's not a suburb of Atlanta, at least not yet. It's more like a district of Atlanta with a bunch of neighborhoods. It's kind of like downtown is a district and midtown, and then Buckhead is another one of those districts. Just after the Civil War, as Atlanta was trying to rebuild from the effects of the Civil War, Buckhead was one of those areas where like the wealthy people went to build their estates and their mansions that was just outside of the city of Atlanta. Of course, back then, that area of Buckhead was considered very far from the big city of Atlanta. And so the wealthy people who were trying to get away would go to what was like the sticks or like the country in the Buckhead area. Eventually, this area continued to grow and more. By the 20s and 30s, there were many mansions being built there in the Buckhead area that still stand today. And in 1952, Buckhead was annexed into the city of Atlanta. And this gave that area like the focus and the attention and the funds for developing the infrastructure and it becoming the economic hub that it is today. By the 1980s, it was well established as an economic hub of the city of Atlanta. And so it continues to prosper and flourish, but there is a part of Buckhead that, there are a lot of residents that are like, you know what, we actually don't want to be part of Atlanta anymore. Many residents of Atlanta complain that Buckhead doesn't quite get the attention that it deserves from the police forces or the different services of the city of Atlanta. And so many residents want to be annexed now out of the city of Atlanta. They want to become their own city, their own suburb, so that they can create the attention that the area deserves. Whether or not that happens is yet to be seen. This has been going on for many years. Many of the residents of Buckhead have been wanting this for a very long time, but I suspect that eventually in the long run, as the city continues to grow so much, that Buckhead will become its own city. And it's true that this area has seen kind of an uptick in crime lately. And so that has really become a big problem for many of the residents of Buckhead. But you have to realize that it's all relative. People who live in Buckhead are used to no crime. Decades ago, there was much less crime there than there is today, but it is part of the big city of Atlanta. And so compared to other parts of Atlanta, there's still far less crime in Buckhead than there is in the other parts of Atlanta. It's just that the residents, they're used to there being less crime. So this uptick in crime obviously is standing out more to the people who live in this area. And so in response, the city of Atlanta really in the last year or so has been focusing a lot on making sure that there is very present, very apparent law enforcement there in the area of Buckhead. So when you go to the area and you just drive around the cities, it's very common to see police stationed in different parts of the Buckhead area because they want to make sure that Buckhead is getting that attention. Naturally, the city of Atlanta does not want to let go of Buckhead. This is where a lot of the tax money comes from for the area. The most wealthy people live in Buckhead. And so that tax money would be very hard to let go. So you can imagine the city is trying to make sure that it gets all the attention that they want. And so this kind of struggle has been going on for a long time, and I suspect it will go on for a lot longer. But you should know that there is certainly a lot more attention there in the area of Buckhead and a lot more police presence to make sure that that crime is controlled. In my opinion, a much bigger factor for whether or not Buckhead is the right place to move to is the schools and the community in that area. Buckhead is known for having some of the best private schools in all of Atlanta, and the community in that area is great. Many people who live in Buckhead are very proud of their area and their neighborhoods, and so they do a great job of taking care of the area. Some of the best shopping and the best restaurants are found here in this area, and so this is certainly one of the best parts in all of Atlanta to live. Buckhead is the place to be. It's like the most desirable, the most affluent area in all of Atlanta. And it's certainly a great place to live for many people, but the cost of living in Buckhead is kind of high. So we certainly need to talk about that as well. For the most part, I'd say the majority of residences in Buckhead are condos, more so condos than single family homes, like detached houses. And so let's take a look at both of these to see how much the average condo costs in Buckhead and how much the average house costs in Buckhead. In the last 90 days, the average condo here was sold for $310,000. Now, you can find condos as low as $200,000 and as high as 2 or 3 million, but keep in mind that if you find a condo at 200,000 or even below 200,000, you're really looking at something that is going to need some work. It might not be in the best shape, but the average is about 310. And you should also know that while there are more condos in this area than single family homes, there are a lot of condos right in that 200 to 500 price range. There are so many that it drives the average down to about 310, but there are also many condos in the 600 and 700 price range. And that, I think, is really the sweet spot, because even at 310, you're looking at some units that are a bit older. For example, 2870 Far Court Unit 801 was sold for $310,000 recently, and it's a 2-bed, 2-bath home, 1,260 square feet, built in 1988. So while the average is in the 300s, you're looking at some older units. For comparison, let's look at some of the more newer units in this area. Built in 2019, 3107 Peachtree Road, Unit 1701 was recently sold for $2.8 million, and it's a 3-bed, 2.5-bath with 3,290 square feet. So you can see, to get the more modern looking homes, you're definitely going to have to pay a higher price tag to live in this most desirable area of Atlanta. And then it's a completely different story when it comes to single family homes. Condos are a bit more affordable. Single family homes, especially because they're not as common here in this area, are going to be more expensive. In the last 90 days, the average house in Buckhead was sold for $1.1 million, but you can find houses or single family residences in this area for as low as $600,000. Again, even at $600,000, you're looking at something that's going to need a lot of work, so keep that in mind. Recently, 1763 Buckhead Valley Lane was sold for $1.18 million. It was a 5-bed, 5-bath home, 5,500 square feet, and built in 2003. So no question that this is one of the best parts in all of the city to live in. There are so many great things about living in Buckhead. It is the most desirable area, the nicest area. And so Buckhead is one of the gems of Atlanta, and many people want to move here, but there are a few things that you need to know about before moving to this area. In fact, I made a whole video about 7 things that you absolutely need to know about before you move to Buckhead. You can check out that video right here. I'll see you in the next one.